And I know you talked about this online, um, talked about, having some of the prospects like Cole Young and Ben Williamson, as guys that could help the Mariners, and talking about their farm system. We talked about this last week. I know that the teams that, have the veteran infielders that the Mariners want aren't really looking for prospects, but I don't know. You do have some of that talent. Well, and then, um, the getting that number three overall pick certainly helps ease some of the sting. If you do trade away some of those guys, and so maybe we can link that, and we'll put Roki at the back, here,
Mhm.
because if you do swing a trade, and ideally your litany of riches of middle and well of position player prospects, it gets put to use. Again, you can feel comfortable, and then this gives us, because you know neither of Brittany and I are really too super draft heavy, in that regards. I think our biggest question was if they go back to a pitching heavy draft like they did this past year after being very position player oriented, for some amount of time. Or if you do go back to the position players, and I think it very well could be, it maybe obviously, the farm system is very unique and things can change, and you've got the international signings, so there's all that. And maybe you're happy with Durangelo. I believe it was Sloan was the other kid early on, and
Mhm.
maybe you're happy with that and you go back. And certainly, if you do trade from that, you would go back. Do you see any? I think that makes that obvious. If you do trade, one of your top guys, it's like, all right,
Sure.
let's load the deck again, right? Any thought
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, they'd probably look at, I'd guess, maybe a college bat. They did like the high school bats. I have kind of have gone from thinking of the prospects in a trade manner to looking at them in a when are they going to be big league ready manner,
Mm,
because it's really starting to feel like the market and everything, for whatever reasons, I'm sure there will be many, it's not going to be in the Mariners' favor. And I, again, there should not be a single prospect off limits. As much as I love and adore Ben Williamson and want to see him play third base in a Mariners jersey someday, and think he would be a fantastic big league third baseman, there really shouldn't be anyone off limits. I don't know that there's a legit trade partner at this time to get you what you're looking for. So when is Cole Young going to be ready is now my question, because at the end of the year, I think we heard through someone local that it was looking like he wasn't going to be ready.
yeah.
Maybe at the end of the 2025 season, I think was the speculation. And now we heard last week that Cole Young is ready to go. Was that said for different intentions? Is he really ready? We don't know. Are they trying to sell him? Maybe, probably. But there's conversation around, Ryan Bliss keeps coming up, and Tyler Locklear came up again, another guy that we haven't talked a lot about and what he can potentially contribute. So I've kind of shifted the way I've been looking at those guys from, potential trade partners and matches, and who would be interested in those guys, to, all right, when can they help the big league roster? Are they there yet? Because while it shouldn't be that you have Ryan Bliss and Leo Rivas on your starting starting nine, um, it's looking like that could be a very realistic possibility in 2025.
Yeah, and as disappointing as it is to say, if you get, one of your three, which is wild, right? One of your three that, and even I think it's funny because Depoto's came out and said it's like we are looking at first base, second base, third base. Like if you get one of those three, if you get a Christian Walker, um, then you call it good, which is again wild to think about. Um, that almost feels like begrudging. All right, we'll take it. 'Cause, I mean, this is the situation that we're in, right? It's like so much of the time there's argument online about the situation, and I understand that. Not the Jersey Shore. I understand that, and it's certainly not great to have to talk about because we would love to be able to sit here and say, all right, sign Christian Walker.
Yeah.
Um, you know, well, even I don't know who is available on the third base market right now. I mean, free agent wise, like this we're operating like we have money, right? And then it's like, oh, because I don't think about it that much because I think in the mindset of I can sign one, I can get one of the toys that I want.
You can get
Um,
one, and you're probably going to have to try and get out of one of the Mitch's contract in order to get one and be comfortable
yeah,
with it,
and
which
so at
is
what point,
insane.
do because I think it really would be, and maybe we can look at this even further next week, since it'll probably be slower, really relatively slow, for the next few weeks, unfortunately. Um, at what point do you consider the avenues to get rid of 17? Because, I don't
Yeah.
think you can get into 2025 with Mitch Haniger on your roster, unfortunately, or you should,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. Again, great guy, it's had some great moments here, but it's just, I think everyone saw it. The fielding looked rough at the end of the year. His hitting was rough relatively all year.
Yeah.
Um, again, great guy, all that, whatever. But
Yeah.
I'm somewhat, again, this is minimally okay with having a Garver there only because right now it seems like he's your backup catcher and they haven't talked at
Jeez.
all about adding a backup backstop. There's been no conversation about it. And I'm like, all right, so we're going in with the thought that, hey, we saw him increase his workload to just catching George to catching everybody. Like, we're going to call it good. And it sounds like they are believing in a bounce back. I know the quote was more on both Mitches. 17, no, we're done. We have to
Yeah.
move.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Mitch Garver, I am a little more okay with that. It's not a lot, but again, if you're looking at Garver or Haniger, which one are you on paper?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm in a roster and not understanding the context, which one are you taking? I'm taking Garver, unfortunately. Again, Mitch
Yeah.
Haniger, great guy. We've joked about being bald together. We've got to move. So I don't know.
Garver is so interesting for me. There's conversation around like, well, he can't be your backup catcher. Why not? He's super serviceable back there. He assuming he can stay healthy, that's really your biggest concern is health.
Yes.
Yes, it is a very expensive backup catcher. Yeah, we'll throw you that. But at least you can get some value out of him in that way. Getting Cal, hopefully, more days off would be great this year. Yeah, and then if you do move him, which I wouldn't certainly be opposed to, you gotta have a better backup catcher plan than a Sebi Zavala type.
Mm-hmm.
And that can certainly be a conversation for maybe another day, because I have lots of thoughts and feelings around that. But yeah, they need to find ways to protect Cal better.
Because then it's that point, and again, we'll push the full conversation to another week. But it's
Yeah.
like you accept this year of Garver, you go through the Garver, and it's like, well, okay, is Ford ready to go? Like, are you is I think you're supposed to start this upcoming season at AAA Tacoma, so it's like, I don't know how we'll see how he does in PCL pitching, but anyway. Um, yeah, I don't know. The third overall pick's great. It's nice that they moved up from being projected to be number 15th in this upcoming draft to somehow stumbling blindly into the number 3 overall spot. The highest in the Jerry Dipoto era. At least looking at some of the mocks here, it is a few college hitters. There's some college pitching, but you talk about a college hitter. The guy I actually saw in Montlake this past year, Ava Arquette.
Mm.
kind of plays up the middle of the infield, who transferred from UW to Oregon State this offseason as UW went through a coaching change. Jace Lavoliette, Texas A&M. And then it goes through some of your college pitchers, Tyler Bremner. Sorry, that's not two N's. I can read, I promise. Then Jamie Arnold is who I initially saw like when that first came out, was the
Yeah.
mock as a lefty from Florida State. What the fun one for me is looking at Xavier Nyans, who is out of Mount Vernon here in the state of Washington, which is
Love
very
that.
fun. Local kid, so
Yeah.
he
Love
would
them.
know the
We love
pain.
our local kids here.
He would know the pain around here. But yeah, so that's kind of it. I think it's pretty straightforward. Like if you're able to, offload some of the position players that you've essentially stockpiled in your farm, having them the 3 overall pick likely gives you the option to be able to stockpile back
Yeah.
somewhat. And obviously it gets you more draft bonus money, right?
It's a
That's
big
how that
deal.
works.
Yeah,
So
definitely. It's
um
it's huge.
it's
They
nice.
really lucked out with that. I
Um
Dan Wilson's reaction was priceless. That was good.
it's still so funny to see these pictures of Dan Wilson doing these things after he was just a guy that was like doing the root sport. Again, I would run into the guy at the booth all the time. Super nice dude.
Yeah.
One of his kids went to O'Day. I was an O'Day kid. I talked to him about that. Now I have to look at him in pregame scrums. It's very weird. Um anyway, this is minor, but I like, since this is like a shorter show than last week, I think we can touch on it. Um so last off season, Scott Service, if you remember him, don't know if you remember him. Scotty Service. Ooh, it's funny to mention him because his Packers play our
Green
Seahawks
Bay
tonight.
fan. That's the
Oh,
first thing I thought of.
sorry, Scott. I need you to lose tonight.
Yep.
Talked about the importance of going to um talk with Luis Castillo in his home, go fishing with him, and that was, I think that's sort of important,
Hmm.
in any sport. You want to be able to trust, the coach you're with, vice versa, and I think leveling with him in somewhere, especially with, not the non-American born players, to have that and have that respect is big. Not quite. It's an American-born player, but Dan Wilson did say he was going to go have dinner with Bryce Miller. This offseason, the Mariners contingent at the winter meetings went home. Dan Wilson went to Texas. God, where's Bryce? Is it New Braunfels? I remember he told me
Mm.
how to say it this past year.
Your
And
guess is as good as mine.
New Braunfels. Yes, it is New
Okay.
Braunfels. I didn't know if it was just Braunfels or
I
New
don't want to butcher
Bryce.
it.
I'm sorry. He's chronically on Twitter, so I have to be careful. Um, but I don't just there's not much you could say. What are your thoughts on it? But I think it's important. It's a guy that,
Yeah.
obviously had some and it's not like Dan and Bryce are new. Obviously, Dan had spent time previously with the Mariners,
Yeah.
being sort of a minor league, just overseer essentially, going around, and he was a regular going around different parts of the organization. So it's not like he was brand new. Obviously, it's well documented how good of a relationship he has with Cal. Um, just I thought that was important to see. I like seeing it as opposed to
Yeah.
we get to spring and it's, I haven't seen you since. I'm not saying he
Definitely.
has to go down the roster and go to Miami where Julio's training with these guys and go out and get a workout in,
Which he
but
might too. He might. That's a great thing about and why catchers make such good managers. Um, what's so important about the catching position is relationship building. And it
Mm.
starts obviously with the pitchers, the pitching staff, and building good relationships with your pitching staff. And then it goes to the entire field. Everyone's looking at you when you're the catcher, everyone's faced towards you, and good catchers build good, strong relationships. It's so important. And Dan Wilson certainly was one of those. He's so incredibly respected, not just in the Mariners organization, but in the league. He's very, very highly thought of, well respected, and he's a really good relationship builder. We've heard that, we have seen it, and so it's a great quality, and it's going to help him. I don't think he needs to win over the clubhouse. I'm
Mm.
sure he's already done that. But you're continually, always, as a coach, as a manager, as a catcher, you're always building relationships, constantly improving them, working on communication. Every single player in that clubhouse needs something different, needs certain communication, needs things taught to them differently. And I'm sure those are things he's still kind of feeling out. How do I approach a JP Crawford when he's in a slump versus how do I approach Julio? So I know the way that all went down. I certainly understand the questions around why there was no interim tag. I had the same questions. I also feel very confident with Dan in that position.
Yeah, and I think, with the manager spot, you listed some of the great things that they need to do, but I think what was important was seeing with the managers that so many of the great assistant, different coaches were around. It's like, I remember one of the big things was people were wondering if Perry Hill was going to be back. Is Pete Woodworth going to be back? And then we get the announcement. I'm like, all right, it's essentially the same. You had a few guys. It's like, okay. And there were some, I think the optimists of Mariners Twitter were really happy seeing what this staff did under Dan Wilson's tutelage, after he took over in such a short time. And they're like, oh, put that over a 162 game season. It's a playoff team. Like, sure, maybe. But I don't know. I like to feel the optimist every once in a while. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you touched on it. I just think it is important, to well, I remember talking to Luis about this after Scott had mentioned the initial part. When I was at spring training for a very minimal time last year, I went to talk to Luis about it, and Freddie Llanos, the great interpreter, helped me with that. But it said it was important for him to, his feet to be where my feet were. I thought that was very interesting,
That's a cool way of putting it.
Different people, different backgrounds, these two pitchers, but still, like, and some that I was thinking about when you were, referencing how important it was as a catcher. Like, Scott was also a former catcher, right? By the time I had gotten there, right, it was obviously the last few years of his career, the time I've been doing this. He talked about, the tendencies of these players that we'd seen for years. He did know them well, and obviously I think this is Dan's first real opportunity to go and do that, and like you said, establish these relationships and how important that is. So I wonder if we will get the Dan Wilson tour this offseason, go and see a few guys, because when you talk about him not really needing to win the room over, I would agree with that, just because I think a lot through our photographers' photos with some of these. The walk off over San Francisco, right? His first game, I can go through so many of the photos, and I'll probably put some of them in the write up of this, where the players immediately go to him and they're around him because they know it's his first win as the manager, and you see his smile so big, and there's some photos where you can see him looking out into the T-Mobile Park crowd and trying to take it in. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot that he needs to do in that regard, but I'm sure it certainly helps for him to, as Luis, have his feet where some of their feet are. So I wanted to touch on that because it was like a tiny little detail shoved into the rest of this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's important.
Matter, So we're talking about another pitcher here with.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, how about those Zaps?
Oh, I'm excited.
I know. Where are you going to watch all those away games, though?
Away games? Huh. I was thinking of coming here since, after all, Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports.
I love that idea. Hope to see y'all here.
Hello there, everybody. Charles Hamaker here with Circling Seattle Sports. I'm joined by Jen Barnes of Rough and Tumble that we happen to be at right now.
Yeah.
Jen, why don't you talk to me a little bit about what we're announcing today, which is our partnership.
I'm so excited about this. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I think all of us here at Rough and Tumble are big fans of what you and your team at Circling Seattle Sports does. And so, I know you know this, but when you came to me with this idea, it just seemed pretty natural. And it's not just me. I think a lot of people in the sports community in Seattle also really respect you and your team. So it's exciting to kind of see these two things melding together, and we're really excited to start implementing some of the things and then hopefully seeing you guys a little bit more often.
Yeah, and so with what Jen says about seeing us more often, you know, we've got a few things in the works, but you'll see watch parties here. We'd like to do a few different of our community drives, which you'll hear about here in a little bit from now. You know, we've got to make our announcements one at a time. I can't drop everything.
Not everything
right.
all at once.
But this has been a home for a lot of our team, whether it's myself, our friend, our photographer Liz is behind the camera. Liz is here often, so our team has kind of adopted this place kind of like our own since I saw you at our soft launch. So, you know, it's been great to have that support. And you know, in a lot of ways, and part of the reason I wanted to do this was the Rough and Tumble embodies a lot of what Circling Seattle Sports wants to do. Obviously with women's sports, with the storm and the rain, but just being, you know, having the game on, every game on.
Yep.
You know, how much of that, you know, did you see align kind of even before this idea was mentioned when I first met you?
I think it's always felt like that. I mean, you and your team were here on opening night, and you just feel like you're part of the space, so it felt like really natural. And the fact that you actually cover all of the sports really makes your group stand out. So you are always covering all the rain games, all the storm games. You'd have women's softball, you'd have women's basketball, you'd have women's hockey. We love it. So all of those things, and obviously passionate M's fans, passionate Hawks fans, and passionate Kraken and Sounders fans. So really, from our perspective, those two things meshed really well.
So, I mean, you heard it from Jen herself, but this will be our home for all of these events, whether it's you can't make it to these games at home, we're always going to direct you to Rough and Tumble, and obviously the games on the road as well. All these, I mean, we're talking about the rain. They've got their schedule out finally, but this will be our home for that.
Great.
The storm games on the road, this is our home.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
I love it.
And when I mentioned it to Jen, when I first had this idea come up, I had this idea come up wearing a pink wig.
Yes, you did.
Ahead of Megan Rapinoe's final regular season home game for the Reign this past year.
Yeah.
I told her it's because I wanted this to feel genuine.
Yep.
I wanted a connection to feel genuine, and it does.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, and I'm so excited to finally announce this partnership.
I can't wait.